I hear a lot of people talk about just all kinds of music, and they're often it's like, I don't like it, but I don't know why I like it. And like, I can pretty accurately say if I don't like something, usually it's because it's doing something that I don't find satisfying from a story perspective.
There has got to be more than this.
Robert Ellis, thanks, man, for coming over.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just going to continue this conversation that started 20 minutes ago when I picked you up at the airport.
Yeah, you guys are popping into the middle of an already begun
exchange.
Yeah.
Well, you're in town in the area for a couple of days. You're playing at the Blue Room on Friday, and I'm just fortunate enough to steal a few minutes of your time to talk about music and art, two of my favorite subjects. And this could go a bunch of different ways, but maybe we could start. I'm just curious about this, but this is just an easy, obvious question. What was the early iteration? Like, what got you into music? Did you show a proclivity for it at a young age and had some encouragement?
Yeah, I mean, my mother was a piano player and she was a teacher. And I don't remember not playing music. So I was very, very young when I started, probably younger than any of my kids are now. Like the way
like younger than 4 then?
Yeah, the way she tells it, I was like, 3 years old playing piano. Yeah. And then I know around kindergarten, she got me guitar lessons and I started getting into guitar too. And I just kind of took to it. So it was so long ago, I have no idea why. And definitely in my experience as a teacher, I just don't think there's a good answer for why some kids just take to it.
Yes. I think there's a good answer. Well, I think you're right. It's impossible to know the exact origins, but there's a lot of talented kids that show, an aptitude for music as such, but they don't often take that next step into like wanting to express themselves through original songs.
Yes.
Now, that's a different animal, I think, than just sheer aptitude.
It is, but it builds on, everything you do, I think builds on everything else you do. And like, I didn't start writing songs, as a little kid. I think that came later, but it definitely was just another tool as I started to get further down the guitar sort of path of like, oh, I want to be able to improvise. I want to be able to solo. Like you start connecting some dots, and then I started getting into some songwriters in a really big way.
Drop a few names.
Well, like John Prine was somebody that, I grew up, in addition to my mom playing piano, I had, my uncle was a bluegrass guitar player and dobro player. He played in a bunch of bands. And we would sit around and play songs at every family event. And that's sort of why I wanted to play guitar. At that early age, I wanted to play Doc Watson and I wanted to like shred bluegrass. I just thought it was so cool. And I remember him singing the John Prine song Souvenirs, like at some Thanksgiving thing or something. And I don't know how old I was, but that was the first time I was like, wow, that's a great song. Yeah. And I sort of made the connection that like some of these songs that I play were written by someone and they had like a, that's another part of the expression. It's not just in the playing. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a telling story. I mean, I saw a post recently of the Wall of Death.
I love Richard Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another.
He's so good. Yeah, I didn't really discover his music until much later, like in my 20s, and was fortunate enough to tour with him a few times and like got to know him a little bit. And I think he's the coolest. His guitar playing is epic and his songwriting is so unique and just interesting musically and lyrically and subject matter, like all of it.
There's not a lot of artists, I feel like, that are, that have that sort of triple threat quality of like the singing and the songwriting and then the musicality beneath all of that. You're in that tribe,
Thank you.
I was like Madison Cunningham, I think would be a modern equivalent to that. Fantastic.
Yeah, so good.
Richard Thompson, Daryl Scott. The club is small. There's not a lot of like John Prine is like, he's a fantastic songwriter and
Yeah.
and performer, a singer and vibe and artist.
Yeah.
You know, the songs are kind of hovering around the same thing.
Totally. Yeah, and I think he would have been the first to say that. But I don't know if you have a certain type of mind. I just don't know how you couldn't start to see parallels in lyric writing and harmonic content and rhythmic content. And like, I teach a lot, like I said, guitar and piano and songwriting stuff. And sometimes I think explaining that stuff to other people kind of solidifies it in my own head a little. It just makes more sense when I have to say it out loud to somebody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that is right. What I'm saying makes sense, you know? And one of the things that I think about a lot is that it's all just story, you know? And there's a narrative quality to writing compelling chord changes and harmony that leads you somewhere. It sets an expectation and it either satisfies it or it doesn't. Like it does all the same things, and a good jazz solo does those same things. You know, like it's difficult, I think, once you start noticing, to not see parallels between just straight up prose and music and writing songs, and I don't know, it's kind of everywhere.
Yeah, like an analog could be made like in the dramatic arts to the reversal of expectation, reversal of fortune, sudden reversal, a setup of expectation, and a deceptive cadence. It's classic, you know, to drag Bach into this.
Totally. I mean, it's the same thing, and it's like the way I describe it, just in terms of guitar playing, is everything is tonic or dominant. You know, it's kind of like tension, release. The tonic likes to stay where it is. The dominant wants to go somewhere.
Home.
Yeah.
We start at home. We go through the hero's journey.
Yeah. Totally.
We have a desire. We set out. We encounter obstacles.
Yes.
Like we get to the denouement, the 5.
Yep.
And then we return home having changed.
And
because we're at the end of the song.
And it feels so good when the 5 resolves to the 1.
And
for those listening who this is like too inside.
I didn't realize we were going to go there that quick. But.
Yeah, but like, you know, basically there's tension in certain chords, and they lead pretty predictably to certain other chords. And that just has to do with like half steps that aren't in the key. Technically, like a dominant 7 on a 5 chord, it pulls really, really strongly towards a really strong chord tone in the 1. And it just, what it does to the listener is it just is like, and then you land, and it's so satisfying. And if you don't land there, it's deceptive. And so, I don't know, it's kind of the same thing. And whether I'm playing as a soloist, like a 5 to a 1, I'm kind of thinking, even if I'm substituting like totally other unrelated changes, I'm still thinking the same way, which is like tension, release, you know, dominant, tonic. Like I want to tell some kind of story, even if that's like a really wild story that takes you in a bunch of places. It has to have some element of like satisfaction, you know, somewhere in it. You can't just, I don't know. I hear a lot of people talk about just all kinds of music, and they're often it's like, I don't like it, but I don't know why I like it. And like, I can pretty accurately say if I don't like something, usually it's because it's doing something that I don't find satisfying from a story perspective.
It's too predictable would be a great example.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Or it's too erratic, and I don't feel like there's enough sort of cohesion or intent.
Yeah. I mean, there's also just like there's the 5-1 idea, the tension and release idea, and there's also the note and not note. You know, the rest and the space.
Totally.
And so if there's just like
same thing.
Yeah, same exact thing. So if there's a song and it just has like a zillion notes in a row, unless it's bluegrass, and even bluegrass will still have like filler notes and hard notes. You know, there's there's the notes that are meant to kind of keep it going, and then there's the ones that are so it's still that balance between rest and not rest.
Yeah, it's contrast. Yeah, you're like shredding bluegrass lick. Doesn't really sound good unless it happens at the right time and ends at the right time. And you feel like, you know, you went on some kind of journey. And often, like, I kind of think the same thing about narrative writing, but you want to see your hero sort of get really close to failing You know, like you want a level of sort of like a soloist.
That's where my improvisational guitar playing lives.
Yeah, that's my
Frankly.
favorite stuff, though. You want to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they made it.
Yeah.
You know, like there's something so satisfying about guitar players who live on the edge and then land in the right place.
100%, man. I mean, that's way better than just trotting out your polished licks and just
lame.
like slinging it all over people. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's rude.
It is. And somebody I was talking to a friend, Tiff Merritt. Do you know her?
Yeah.
She's fantastic. And we're good friends. And we were talking on the phone earlier today. And she just sort of in passing said that she was on this call talking about AI and music, which I know is a big concern. And I'm definitely concerned about AI, not really as it relates to music at all. My concerns are much more sort of global and
Structural.
apocalyptic. Yeah. But in terms of music, I just was like, oh, don't worry about that. And she's like, why? I was like, you know, like the idea that anything could replace that thing we're talking about, which is like, I don't know. I'm a determinist, so this is also really
What does a
sketchy.
determinist mean?
I don't believe in free will.
Okay.
So, like, I just don't think it's a super sound concept. Like the idea that we're making any choices, really, you know, like just doesn't make any sense.
We have to believe, like the argument, I mean, War and Peace, to drag some literature in, is all about that. It's really the question being analyzed and revisited is whether or not there's free will. And I think that Tolstoy's conclusion is that we must live as though there is, but it's likely that there isn't.
There just can't be. I know it feels like there is.
But what good does it do you? I mean, we don't need to go here really, but
I think I know I digress a little bit, and maybe we'll get back to where I was.
We'll try.
But I do think that's an important question. I think what good it does you is if you look at the world as a series of cause and effects, it allows you to have a lot more compassion for others when they do something not what you thought they should do. For instance, like the way that our criminal justice system works is largely based on this sort of like intent model. Like everything about it, we're trying to prove that somebody is essentially evil, that they knew what they were doing.
malicious intent.
Yeah,
Yes.
malicious intent. They knew what they were doing and they did it anyway. And as you get into these more complicated stories and you find out that like, you know, Camus or something like The Stranger, well, actually there was like these issues with his childhood. He had this really rough childhood and then that led him to this place. And then when he shot the guy, the sun was actually in his eyes. He didn't mean to shoot him. He meant to shoot in his direction, but he did. Like it just gets so complicated, and you can attribute all of these causes to the effect. And while I don't think that gets people off the hook, that's a separate issue. If somebody is dangerous, we should do something about them so that they're not dangerous anymore. But in terms of feeling, I don't think that you have to hate someone in order to punish them for doing something bad. Does that make sense? Like, let's say a bear, this is like a Sam Harris thing that he talks about, but a bear kills someone. We might shoot the bear. You know what I mean? Like we might do something with the bear, but
we don't hate the bear.
We don't
for
hate the
killing
bear.
it. Yeah.
It's a bear. And the cause and effect that led it to kill that person, while tragic, is totally...
So how does Sam deal with the apples and oranges argument then? That would be like, well, people aren't bears. People have ability. It's in the bear's nature to kill a person. It's not in a person's nature to kill another person.
Well, I think there would be a lot of examples, some that he talks about, where like the guy who in Texas went up on the tower at
UT.
and then afterwards was like left this note that was like, you need to look at my brain because I don't know what is going on, but these thoughts are not normal, and I think after I'm gone they should study my brain. It turns out he had this massive tumor pushing on his amygdala. And one could argue, you know, I think pretty successfully.
Yeah, that may have had an impact on his behavior.
That made him act in a way that is not acceptable,
Yeah.
you know, like, and then gradations of that idea all over the place, you know, like, of course, you know, it feels like I'm making a decision. It feels like that, but like what made me, I could say I'm going to raise my hand right now, but like the actual math of like, why did I raise that one instead of this one? Like, there's just so many causes and effects that lead to every moment. And if every single detail of everything that we're doing right now was the exact same as it was a minute ago, I think we'd be having the exact same conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Perhaps, and I think that we are as interesting as this is. We are arriving at a place at which I remember again why I didn't go into philosophy.
I'm out of my depth, also, but it's just
because no, I mean it seriously. Because I do actually these questions are really important in a way on a level because they have implications in real world policies and how you interact with the people, and the way that you see the world is the way that you treat other people in large. So I understand its use. However, just as I felt when I was a high school kid being exposed to some of these ideas for the first time, I was interested to a point, and then it got so theoretical that I'm like, yeah, but I just want to write a song. I don't fucking care about this. I just want to make art. It just like kind of lost its appeal. And so it's like where the absence of free will has to do with whether or not you write a song or what you write about. I don't know if it's like a very interesting question. It's like, if it helps you write a song, then great. But I think that I'm more interested in the song and the guy who writes the song and the process by which they made the song and what that song is about. The seed of it's like, oh, well, Robert Ellis was going to write the song ultimately, inevitably anyway. It's like, okay, fine. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, in a funny way, thinking about writing narratives and creating stories, like, yeah, I don't really believe that I have any free will, but when I'm creating stories about people, I do think it's worth noticing that it's interesting when things make sense. Like, you're into Russian literature, like things like Chekhov's gun, like if you're going to introduce something, it kind of needs to do something, make sense. Like if somebody does something bad in a story, you kind of want to know why. Like you want to have some indication of what it is that made this character take this turn. And I don't think there needs to be a moral per se, but I do think you want, as a reader or a listener, to have some satisfying answers for why that guy cheated on his partner of 30 years, or why, like I just, those to me are the questions in songs and stories that like are interesting.
Well, I feel like on some level we are all involved we're all in the meaning business here. And music and the arts provide many services and non-services. They also just kind of exist of their own accord. But one of those things is to like give the world, make sense of the world at least for a second. So I think that falls in with what you might be saying. I'd love to talk then on that note about the way that you set about writing a song. Because one of the things you do well is write a hook. I'm just going to speculate this from the outside.
Yeah. Let's
you know what I mean? Like when I hear, it's like, I like to write to hooks. I like to write to titles. It helps me steer my writing, even like in prose writing, in anything, songwriting though, especially. It's like, if I can think of a cool way that's just off the cliche to aim at what I want to explore, then that gives me, that helps my verses along. And so when you're setting about writing, do you write, and I feel like the answer is going to be like, it depends and a lot of things. But do you have an idea in mind when you sit down? Do you have a title in mind? Do you have a pocket full of titles that you're kind of carrying around all the time, then one speaks to you one day?
No.
Okay.
And I do think that this is related in some ways to worldview. And maybe we can circle.
Let's do it.
Circle
here
and
totally
make sense of this. But like, I think I used to have a lot more just sort of like ownership of what I was doing. When I'd set out to write a song, I would maybe have a title, or maybe I kind of knew what I wanted it to be about, or maybe I was listening to something on the radio and it kind of got in my, in my psyche, and I was like, I'm going to write something kind of like that or whatever. I used to have like a starting point, now, especially with this most recent record, and really anytime I write, what I want and what I like is just to open my mouth or play the guitar and to find something interesting and then follow that thread of interest wherever it ends up going. And like those historically have been my favorite songs throughout my career that I've written. And I think it's just recently that I've realized like, oh, I should just do that all the time. I should make that sort of a part of my practice and my method of writing to just really intentionally do this. And what I mean by that is people always say, probably when you ask this question, like, well, it all depends. Sometimes songs just come out in a fury and they write themselves and they're over in 5 minutes and those are the best ones. But other times I start with a title and I have to really work on it and blah, blah, blah. I think that is I think that's something that you can refine. You know, like that feeling of just writing a song in 5 minutes is something that if you actively work on just getting a stronger sense of like where your radar is, you know, like open your mouth and just say some words. And then if you know which one out of those 5 words interests you, it's easier to go in that direction and then to follow that. And like what I find is that when I'm a little more hands off and a little bit less directive in that part of the process, I just end up writing such more honestly about my own life. And I'm able to just touch topics that I never consciously would have otherwise, you know? And it's sort of that thing where like when you're writing about characters, you can often say more honest things about yourself than if you had been writing from first person, you know? But I think even when I'm writing from first person, like there's a song on the new record, Gene, which it's like one of my
kickoff song.
Yeah, it's my favorite song on the record, probably. It was written... You know, it was sort of stream of consciousness song written to my son, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that's kind of its strength in some ways. Like that's what I like about it. You know, if I sat down and thought about all the things I want to say to my son, I'd have a lot of advice, you know, a lot of like pearls of wisdom, things to say. But as I started writing that song and things just started coming out, the things that were interesting to me were sort of the gray areas and the I don't know moments. Like the chorus of that song is like, the darkness frightens even me. Kind of the idea is just like, I don't fucking know either. This is crazy. Like we're alive and I'm just as confused and surprised as you are, but I have found a way to enjoy it and wake up every day and want to keep doing it. So like, and that's something I just don't feel like I ever really heard from grownups as a kid.
I don't think the kids do. And I don't think it's because the grownups it's not a conspiracy to keep kids in the dark.
No.
It doesn't occur to grownups to stop playing the role of the one who tells you when to go to bed and be like, hey, you know what? Just so you know, I'm just doing my best here, man.
Yeah, this is all crazy.
Yeah. So I think that is a great piece of wisdom to give to your kid who I'm sure he doesn't like know every word just yet and hang out with it.
He doesn't even know it's about him. He's 5.
Not. Yeah.
But he does. I'm like super into meditation. I wake up every morning really early. I meditate in the morning and at night. I'm like kind of obsessed with it. It's really important to me. And I sit in this one part of my house. My wife likes it to be cold, which cold to me is like anything below 75. Like I'm just not made for cold weather. So she keeps the house at like 71, 70. So when I wake up in the morning, I am fucking freezing.
Yeah.
And so I go sit in this room in my house with a little space heater, even though it's summer right now in Texas. I sit by this space heater and that's where I do my meditations. And Buddy, my oldest, and now my middle one, they usually wake up around 6:30. You know, I usually get up at 5. They'll come in around 6:30. They'll sit with me. And I have these little meditations for kids that we do with the 3 of us. And it's really special and they love it. And I was gone on the road the other day and Erica sent me a picture because she was in her room. She came out and my 2 boys were sitting by my space heater at 6:30 in the morning, just by themselves. And she was like, this is the cutest thing I've ever seen.
Dude. I mean, it's impossible not to compare that to like family devotions time, you know,
like totally.
It's just the Buddhist version of the ancient tradition. That's wonderful. I want to talk about the spiritual practice too, but I just wanted to share this story of my own, the scales falling from my eyes as a kid about the adults, getting the skinny on adults. Because I was a pretty serious reader as a youngster, and my parents they were just like glad I was reading. So I just read a lot of stuff that maybe I shouldn't have read.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I remember sitting in the back of church I grew up in a little town in Idaho, and reading this James Michener novel. And Michener, he writes these just like huge tomes of like the history of Hawaii, from a geological perspective until present day. It's crazy, long ass things. But I was reading one called Space, and it was about like this charlatan evangelical minister like shacking up in a hotel with this chick. And I'm just like, oh my God, these people's life. I was looking around me. I'm like, what is going on in this church? I was like, adults are fucked up. Like adults don't know what's going on. And it was really helpful, actually. Like they didn't tell me that, but I kind of was like onto the game at a young age, being like, all right, it helped me be a little more self-permissive and i.e. maybe rebellious and stuff in my teenage years when I was told, to do this and not this. I'm just like, you don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very helpful for kids to kind of know that the adults don't know what they're claiming to know.
No, and in a religious context, especially in this country, and at least as I experienced it, like growing up Southern Baptist, like that is all about having the answers. Like every single thing that grown-ups tell you is like, oh no, we have it figured out. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just so... I think irresponsible in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's well-meaning.
It is well-meaning. It is well-meaning, but like, that degree of certitude, I personally, I can only speak from experience, but I do believe that it's doing damage. When kids go out into the real world, me included, and they look around and they go, this doesn't square with the way that I was told it was. It's really hard. Yeah. It's alarming.
For sure. And that fall from innocence happens to every kid at some point. And I think that that's a gentle way to usher them into that inevitable world of uncertainty.
Yeah.
A song like Gene. So,
thank you.
You're not such a bad dad after all.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm still, it's early. My
oldest a lot could go wrong.
My oldest is 5, so I'm not an expert on this. I'm just winging it. But, I try to just hang with them and really just like be like with them, actually present with them and treat them with respect. And I don't know. I think personally, with what we were talking about a second ago, like, it's not that I didn't get to where I am now, like that's not the point. What I think I'm a little bit still bitter about and bent out of shape about is that I had to take this massive detour of just unlearning a lot of things before I could really start on the path that I'm on now towards like being okay. You know,
like unlearning the mores of your Christian upbringing, for instance.
Yeah. And like, I still got here, like as if that's some sort of, that I feel like that's something that I hear often, which is like, well, you can believe whatever you want. We're just going to tell you all of these things. And if you don't, you're also going to hell. So, but by all means, if you want to go find out things for yourself, like the only thing you have to deal with is the insane fear of eternal damnation.
Yeah.
And like, I just think it's kind
of... You got a heavy dose of that growing up?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the song, the bluegrass. I can't remember the name of the song, but
Sing-along.
The sing-along. Yeah. That comes through loud and clear on that tune.
Yeah.
Also, badass flat picking. I mean, that is some high speed bluegrass nonsense.
Yeah, it is gobbledygook.
I mean, no props, but like that's when that was one of my early joys of discovering your music, because a lot of times with the bluegrassers, and I spent a bunch of time in that world. It's the only world.
Yeah.
And it's a world that's enough. And if it's not enough for you, well, then maybe you aren't really a bluegrasser. But you know, with that song, you're still like, you can hang, okay, but you're like doing all these other things. And that was like really interesting to see. Also, like, it's pretty damn hard to play that fast and that clean.
Thank you.
And do you have to spend, I mean, like, I spent a long time working at that and it's not. It's I had to put it away.
I
eventually.
did as a kid, and it's now kind of second nature to be able to do that stuff. And I was just at a
like metronome and
Oh, yeah.
practicing and diligent. Yeah.
trying to play fiddle tunes and just learning
Yeah,
tons
yeah.
of tunes. And I was actually last weekend. A buddy was retiring from the Air Force, and I went and played his retirement ceremony, which was actually so beautiful. It was like just what a beautiful day. But at night we went to his house, and there was this other guy there who was a mandolin picker, and we just started playing bluegrass tunes. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that song. And they they're buried in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And while I was definitely rusty, I haven't played any of those in a while. There's so much a part of my just like right hand technique that they kind of, I don't know, they kind of came.
They didn't disappear too far.
They didn't disappear.
Yeah.
And I still, I do think articulation is something I still think about a lot, regardless of what style I'm playing. Like the ability in bluegrass to cross pick, to pick things up and down on different strings, and to really be conscious of just how loud a note is. Like that's what makes those fast runs or that really great rhythmic bluegrass playing. That's what makes it swing the right way, is the combination of like the weight of your arm versus your wrist, the strength of your wrists. Like those give you different articulations, just like on a snare drum. And when you're doing a pattern like that, the loud, soft, and the play between those things, that's what makes it feel good. And I still think about that a lot, regardless of what music I'm playing, even on telly, like as a just force of habit, I'll like pick through notes, even if it's just like a single solo, note. It's just like, bah, like I could play it like that, or I could play it like this. And I do think there's a subtle difference in just the way it speaks.
It's a rounder tone, I think. I mean, that's what you learn from. That's what's so beautiful about bluegrass. One of those things is that it really is about like the whole universe is happening in that contact between the plectrum and that string.
Yeah.
And you can spend your life like living there and never run out of things to say or articulations or ways to think about it. Or also just the negotiation of minute distances, particularly when you're cross picking across strings. If you're like downstroke on one string that's getting a little bit in the weeds for a second, downstroke and then upstroke on a string below, or even harder, downstroke on one string and then an upstroke on the up string. Like that weird motion. Yeah. And all of it's like that's it's a lifetime affliction.
It is, but again, talking about parallels, like I noticed really similar parallels. I got obsessed with Django for a long time and was like, I still love listening to him, but like gypsy, jazz guitar picking it's got its own set of, to similar ends techniques, like the way he did rest stroke and like through picking, it was all about volume. And it was from a time that we don't live in anymore, where acoustic instruments had to keep up with either the sound of a noisy room or other instruments like a banjo or a fiddle. It's so loud. Like it was just something you had to think about in a different way. And I don't think, guitar players now, there's barely ever a situation where I really need to focus on being loud. But I do think that it adds and contributes to that really niche, unique style that you get from certain bluegrass, and like why it's so cool. It's kind of like that David Byrne thing. Did you ever read that How Music Works book?
I did, yeah. It's around here somewhere.
It's been a long time too, but I think like the main premise of that book is how like the rooms that music is being performed in actually dictate in a way what the music sounds like, in a very basic way, like CBGB was shaped this way, and the kind of music that was played in there made sense for this room, and the room actually influenced the music. And then he talks about like Gregorian chants and how the halls that they were singing were so reverberant that you really couldn't have music with anything other than like diatonic harmony, because the tails would be hanging for so long that if you changed chords, they'd clash. Yeah. So like, I don't know, it's an interesting theory, but I do think bluegrass is very much, a part of that. Like these were they were songs and instruments meant to be played in a very specific context. And because of that, like technique and volume and sound, and even the way the harmonies, you know, like vocal harmonies were voiced and sang, like all that stuff was kind of pre-pickup, you know? Like
volume was a factor in all of those early expressions.
Yeah. And I think so nice to listen to for that reason, like the way that bluegrass is so dynamic, two vocalists like swelling together and then backing off together, and people taking a step forward when they want to solo, like so much of that dynamic range I miss, you know, like that's what I like about that music is like that attention to just intensity, you know?
A couple of things that would come to mind because I've been thinking about dynamics a lot lately. I'm working on new music as we always are, and there's just this, you know, maybe it's a leftover little kid thing or teenage thing. You're just like, it's got to be loud, so you're like compressing the crap out of stuff.
Yeah,
and I just noticed that like every degree of compression represents a loss in a dynamic.
Absolutely.
Range, you know what I mean? And but the modern, so how have you, because I feel like the records have been recorded different ways with different people, and it'd be interesting to have a discussion about the maybe different aesthetics that went into some of those processes. Like we could start maybe with the Jacquire King record that you made. Was the discussion of dynamics a part of that, or that's a springboard?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That was made down the road here at Eric Massey's place, mostly, and then we did some at Jacquire's room at Blackbird. And I mean, you know, I guess I don't know what the credit ended up being, but I like music directed that. So you know, I had a really strong hand in arranging the band. And dynamics is a really important part of just music to me.
And that's the Lights from the Chemical Plant.
The Lights from the Chemical Plant record, yeah. Overall, I think that some of Jacquire's, just some of his preferences in the final mix, it was a much bigger sort of you know, wall of sound type thing. I mean, there's like a lot of sonic widening happening on the vocals, and like his records sound huge. Yeah. Like fucking huge.
That record sounds huge.
It sounds huge. And it's a testament to his like genius in mixing, you know, like definitely choices were made on the front end. Like he really cares about where a kick drum goes, and like, you know, the way things are mic'd is really important. But I do think where he really like is just, I don't even understand it, is he's able to do total magic in mixing that can just, it can add information to a performance that wasn't there before.
I over the pandemic, I sat in on a Universal Audio live stream with him.
Yeah.
Talking about you know, plugins that you should use for their lineup to mic your drums, and this is how Jacquire does it. And it was just like, oh, this is the big leagues here. And in that, to that sense, it's like the mic placement, but then he's like scooping ranges out of these two mics, and he's like, see, if you solo it here, it just doesn't sound as good. But when I let everybody in, it was just like, wow, I'm glad I don't even try to record drums.
Yeah.
There's just,
I mean, it's like sonic painting in a way,
it's,
you know, like finding a place
again,
for
the subtlety
everything,
of it,
creating an image, and just realizing that you're going to have to, I mean, I think where we all go wrong, not being Jacquire, is we start to make records and we go, I really like this preamp for snare, and I like this preamp for kick, and I really like this one for this vocal, and I like this compressor, and like we end up with all of these different pieces of gear and all of these different signals that on their own sound incredible. But when you put them all together, the end result sounds, nothing is able to speak because you're not thinking about the overall thing you're making. You're thinking about making each ingredient amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a level of artistry with really good mixing engineers, really good recording engineers, and just realizing that some things don't need to.
Well, there's
sound
also
that
a
great.
piece of like wizardry
Yeah.
in the ability to imagine how these two
Yeah.
pieces are going to play together, or an experience of like, it sounds like it's going to be great, but I've done it on this record and this record and this record, and it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have that experience, you're just like, it doesn't sound right, but you can't put your finger on it. It's like, why
Yeah.
doesn't it? If you solo the thing, it's like fucking slamming. This sounds great. Like,
Yeah.
put them together.
It's not,
That's
yeah.
not it.
But I think some of that is a product of our modern age. And like, when we're producing bands at Niles, like a good example is that Jamestown Revival record that I did. That is 5 people in a room with 0 isolation and a bunch of large diaphragm condensers. And Josh, my partner, is an incredible engineer. But really, like, there wasn't a lot of trickery used on that because the sympathetic vibrations between all those mics, it really, I thought, created something really special and magical. Like, they are great performers. They got in a room and they did the songs, and we put mics up, and I really like the way the snare drum sounds in the vocal mic. You know what I mean? Like, and if I solo the snare mic, I'm like, I don't like this as much. If I solo the vocal mic, I'm like, I don't like this as much. But all of them together, so that's like something I think about a lot now, is just like, I just go in, we set things up, and I just really listen. And I don't really think a lot about bleed. There's bad bleed, but I think more about, what do I like? Like, do I like the way this sounds? Even if there is a bunch of bleed, I don't immediately start trying to eradicate it, and it really makes my job easier on both the mixing side and the producing side, because one, you can't go back and fix that mistake you made. But then also, like, I don't know, you just don't end up having to do a ton of trickery on the back end usually, because everything just kind of sounds good. Like, that Jamestown record sounds a little different than the board roughs from the day of tracking. You know what I mean? It just kind of sounded good. And Josh did some really cool, clever stuff in mixing, but he was like, yeah, I just want to kind of stay true to what we did,
How often are you producing other artists' projects? Is it ebb and flow?
Yeah, once every couple months, I'm doing something.
You have a studio that you work out of, it sounds like.
Yeah, in Fort Worth, Niles City. Is me, Josh, and our partner Jimmy, and we all make different kinds of records and work together sometimes and separately other times. And I just, a record that I did just came out. This guy, Thomas Chorba, that record's really good. It's called Wind Chimes. Also just really live performance based. Good songwriting, interesting playing.
Is it, do you find it, do you have to exercise discipline in not falling into recording the same way? When something works for one band, you're like, oh, maybe I'm the guy that sets up the mics and records the performance.
I don't know. A lot of times, again, it's just following this lightning rod of like really listening and just asking myself at all times what is interesting, because it'll tell you if it's not going to work. Like if something doesn't sound good, you make a change. And often I'll go in, there was this bluegrass band, the Little Smokies, and their record, I think we finished mastering it, but we went in with this whole idea of doing like this Blum line, basically like we had gotten these really cool ribbons and we were going to position everyone in the room with, no one would have their own mics per se. They would all be sitting with a mic between each of them. And basically we were going to try to do this really cool thing where we were managing bleed in this way, where we could sort of turn on the right and left side of these stereo mics to give a soloist a boost, but overall the sound would be really cohesive and never change. And that sort of required them to all stand in a line. So we spent like a day setting up these mics, and then they get into the studio, and like an hour into playing, they're all like, this feels kind of weird. We don't really love, is there a way we could like change the way we're sitting? And me and Jimmy are like, yes, go ahead. And so we're just like, just sit the way you want to. And of course they sat in a circle, and none of our miking techniques ended up working at all. And I was just like, fuck it. Let's completely just start now and figure out how we should mic them the way they're sitting. And I love the way the record turned out, but it wasn't the way I intended at all. And sometimes a vocalist, will have the best intentions of doing all the vocals live, and you tell them, like, this is how we're going to do it. If you want to do it. Yeah, I do a ton of pre-production with people, and some of that involves just like setting expectations for like, you need to be really comfortable singing this. So like over the next weeks, sing this song a bunch of times. Like when we're in there and bleed is an issue, you don't want to be figuring this stuff out, but sometimes it won't work either because of the pressure of the studio or, a singer's inability to do it in a certain context. And so we'll put them in a booth or we'll put them upstairs. I feel like a lot of what I'm trying to do is just preserve some element of live performance. And usually I'll start at everyone performing together. And then as I realize that that's not going to be possible, I'll maybe put one person somewhere, but then the rest of the core players will still be in the same room. And then if that doesn't work, like the least thing that I want, like bare minimum, I want bass and drums to play together. I don't like building tracks from the ground up. It's just not, it's not my thing. And I think there's people that could do that much better than I could. So that's sort of the bad pitch that I give to clients who come to me is like, I'm not good at that. So if that's what you want, if that's the way you're used to recording, you should not do it with me.
I stumbled on something yesterday. Gotye, that artist.
Yeah.
He had, somebody I used to know, the huge, crazy runaway
And
hit.
so good.
So good.
That's so good.
I had no idea that song is basically just all samples, and that was really his thing.
Yeah.
And this, I watched this YouTube video because it was just like he hasn't released anything since, and he just made an announcement a while back. It was like there will be no more music, and like
I love him.
What a bold statement!
I love him.
So awesome.
It's so
you
cool.
should. I'll send this video to you. You got to watch it. It's 10 minutes long, and it's a lot of old footage of his interviews and stuff. Just like a really down to earth, like intelligent, big-hearted guy he comes across. And also like this particular project was all about, he got into Ableton and it just would go down to the record store in Victoria, Australia, where he lived, and grab records. What's that?
Probably in Melbourne, Victoria. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, geographic wise guy.
Sorry, you're doing great.
And you get the records, and he built the whole thing out of samples, and I was just like, that is such a cool way that I just wouldn't even ever think of as the building blocks for making. Not I just thought it was a hip hop thing, and it's like, oh no, you can just make songs this way.
You can do
anything you want.
I mean, what you should do at all times, and I know I keep harping on this, but it's the same thing I tell my students. Every student comes to me and they're like, what should I be doing? Should I be practicing scale? Should I be working on songs? And I'm just like, what is interesting to you? Because that will be the thing that you do the most effectively. And that's kind of my guiding principle. Like if I don't feel like writing songs, I don't write songs. I don't force myself to do anything that I'm not interested in because it just won't be productive. And that makes my practice routine look kind of weird sometimes. Sometimes I'll hear some Irish guitar player that I really like, and then I'll spend my whole day working on this Irish song, when I have all this other work I should be doing, songs I should be writing. But like, I just find that the biggest obstacle for me is getting from not playing music to playing music. And if something is interesting to me, I do that.
That is such a beginner's mind thing. I mean, I've had a few students, God help them, but the beginner ones for sure. It's like, well, I want to learn how to play guitar. And always the go-to is like, what's a song you like?
Yeah.
Because that's the reason why you want to do this. So let's learn that song. That'll be a fun way to start. And then like, there's something so magical when you're starting out of mastering a song that you heard that was somebody else's thing. And it was like it came out of the speaker. Yeah. And now it's in your hands and now you're making it live. It is a fucking magical thing to experience for the first time.
It's still so cool.
Is, yeah.
It's still so cool if there's something that I hear that I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Like what are they doing? And then once you get it under your hands and you get the harmony in your head, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. And I did not speak that language like 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. But, I think you have to really hone that ability to just recognize what is a waste of your time. And as far as the scales thing goes, like at the point that you need to practice scales, you will want to practice scales, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to be prescriptive and be like, you really need to do this, this, and this, because I just think it'll force you to like sort of walk by your guitar every day and be like, I really should be doing that, you know, and like not pick it up.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I work.
I know, you know what? I love this, like what motivates us to work. I notice that for me, I always have like, I think like you, I have many projects going and things that I'm overwhelmed perpetually. And I work to deadlines and that's the only way I can prioritize this over that.
Yeah.
But I notice that in any given time, I have one job and one escape. Or many escapes, but there's always like, so I feel like I need to have something I'm supposed to be doing, so that I can get away with. And a lot of times that's where music lives for me. It's always was something that I was like sneaking in, or I shouldn't be doing, or it's too late, or I should be in bed, or I should be studying, but instead. And when you turn pro, I make myself, I turned pro back in 98.
Turn pro?
Yeah, I do too. I want to turn pro so bad. But when you start doing it for a living, you're doing it a lot, and you're like trying to put out records, and you're trying to make songs. It's like it turns into a job. It just sort of is in a way. And so I feel like any effort I can make to avoid that designation in my mind has been critical to maintaining the sense of joy.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason, like, I'm working on this novel right now. I've got this show that I'm working on, and the novel is my job. Like 500 words a day. I sort of want to do it when I'm in it.
Yeah.
I like it.
But it takes you a while to sit down.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I'll do anything but. Anything but.
Yeah.
Including playing guitar, and I'll just be like, I'll stumble on something and be like, yeah, where's that? Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that. There's one thing. There's one other thing I want to say about mystery, and it's very specific. But there's nothing more wonderful than listening to a record or a piece of a record and hearing something where you're just like, no idea.
Yeah.
What is that sound? And for me, the first thing that comes to mind is there's that Postal Service record that came out in whenever that was, 03 or something. It just melted the world. And I was one of the people, that record has that on it.
Yeah.
But there's this one that's like, this place is a prison.
Oh, I love that.
That sound of the...
Yeah, it's so good.
Like, what is that? What did he do? I want to get him on the pod just so I can know the answer to that.
I love that record still.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What a weird thing that record would stand the test of time. Death Cab guy, he came to town. He played the Postal Service record. I think they filled the Bridgestone.
Yeah, they did Death
month.
Cab and Postal Service, I think, on that tour, right?
Ben Gibbard. Yeah, he did both of those things. Amazing record.
It's so
great
good.
songs and so creative.
It reminds me of
thing.
like early romantic, just like tension in high school. Like I remember being in the dance room and like having like, somebody that I was hanging out with was like practicing dance or whatever. And that record was on, and it was just like this like very exciting, tense time where you're just like, you feel so just like electric, just accidentally grazing hands or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's what
totally.
That record makes me think of. And still to this day, if I put it on, I get a little like soupy and emotional.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all have the songs that evoke the teenage memories. That's what's so powerful. Another thing that's powerful about it. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, can you play a song?
I would love to play a song.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you going to play?
I don't know. Maybe I should play a song. Can I play On the Run? Have you heard that?
That's
song?
the only one you can't play.
I can't play that one. Okay.
I'd love to hear it, man.
Okay, cool. I'll do that.
Okay.
There are stretches of West Texas that don't even have a name. We stopped and took the chance to gas up every time it came. The scorching smell of summer vapor rising from the road, strapped into a fuselage and waiting to explode. Everyone out in this desert is just passing through or lost, dissipate into the atmosphere like smoke from the exhaust. Keep your eyes on the horizon, back turned towards the wind. At every highway's ending, find another one begins. On the run, does not have a name. We are running out of money, but we must stay in the game. Running from the sinking feeling that this never ends. From anything that's preordained or feels like giving in. And it don't make no difference how far away you go. Seems like we just end up in the one place we really know. On the run. Feels like standing still, I'd rather go to hell. We are running from the silence at the bottom of the well. Running from becoming another book up on the shelf. We are running from each other. We are running from ourselves. And it don't make no difference how far away you go. Seems like we just end up in the one place we really know. On the run. Are we doing a good job?
I'm having. I mean, I don't care. I'm having fun.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this isn't for them, whoever that they are. No, as long as you're having fun, that's.
I'm having fun,
yeah,
but
I
also
it's like 5. We're fine.
We're good.
We've been like 40 minutes going. I got a little secret clock. I kind of keep an eye on there.
Oh, and we're going to keep talking, but that song's going to happen. And
Exactly.
Then, okay, great. Now
exactly
I understand.
what's happening. Yeah.
Please leave this in too.
We will. I promise. I want to talk about the John Hartford covers album you did with Courtney Hartman.
Yeah.
That's another one there. I was just like, that record just kind of came out of nowhere to me. I had no idea that I associated you guys with different worlds for me. And the fact that all of a sudden there was this beautiful music that came together was a wonderful surprise. And now I want to know how that happened.
Well, it's actually really interesting. So I mentioned earlier my uncle who played bluegrass. When I was a kid, he was playing with a bunch of different bands, and then later in life he moved outside of where the ice cream is made, Bluebell ice cream in Texas, Brenham. He moved outside of Brenham, and in his job, in his earlier career, he was a machinist. And some guys he knew through bluegrass were making these really fancy capos called Elliott capos. And my uncle was machining these capos, and my aunt worked in the shop. She polished them, put them together, and they make, in my opinion, the best capos on the planet. I have one on my guitar. But anyway, years ago, I was at a music festival in Portland, Oregon. And Pickathon, yep. And that was a really interesting time. That was where I met my now business partner, Josh Block. He was there playing with White Denim, and that's been a lifelong friendship. And then Courtney was there playing with Della Mae, and I saw them play, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're so good. And they were sitting in like a picking circle backstage, and I saw on her guitar she had one of these Elliott capos that my uncle probably made. So I just was like, hey, that's an Elliott. And she's like, yeah, it is. And we get to talking. Then I sit down and we play some tunes, and it just sort of started a friendship. She's the coolest, best guitar player on the planet.
Amazing guitar player.
As good as it gets.
Yeah.
And so thoughtful. I mean, as a writer and an improviser, just everything she does is her. Like, it's Courtney, just kind of coming through.
Highest praise ever.
Whatever vehicle it is. And I don't know. I just loved her. And we ended up, every time we would see each other, we'd sit down and we'd play tunes, and it just was a really special thing. And then, over the course of a few years in New York, one time I think we were playing some John Hartford tunes. I think it started with like Delta Queen Waltz, which is a song of his that it wasn't one of the big hits, and even for Hartford fans, I don't know if it was like the hugest song, but I think really special song. The harmony, the lyrics, like really weird waltz about the Delta Queen, a riverboat, and just, I don't know, the chords and everything about it's so beautiful. And we played that tune, and then we start talking about him, and we both knew this other tune. And then eventually, I think that night at her place in New York, we were like, we should just do an album of John Hartford tunes. Like, this is so cool. And so we started talking, and we picked out our favorite tunes. And then she came down to Texas, and we recorded that at our studio in Fort Worth in like one day. And it was just me and Courtney sitting around a couple mics playing live. And it's one of my favorite records.
It's a beautiful record. So very musical, and that's probably why it's easy to go back to all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the time, though, and this is a good thing to just keep reminding myself. When we finished recording the record and I was listening back to roughs, I was like, that one's got this one mistake, and that one's got this, like, the vocals aren't totally balanced right, and like, just my critical brain was really picking it apart. But because of the limitations of the recording and the timeline, there was really no fixing it. So I was like, well, I'll just live with it for a little bit. And then the record got made, mastered, and put out. And then I didn't really think about it for a long time. And now when I hear it, I don't hear any mistakes. That's just the way the record is. Yeah. And I fucking love it. Yeah. It's like my favorite thing I've ever done. And it was definitely sort of a lighthouse, like, guiding principle in this most recent record I made. It's like, okay, well, that worked. I look back on a lot of records throughout my career and a lot of things that I've done, and I don't know what it is, but there are things that I don't like anymore, and that one has just really always been like, every time it comes on, I like it. I like the way it sounds. And I think that's just because we didn't think too much about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like there's a theme that's reemerged again, and there's something about like performance forward recording. Yeah, of just like capturing the moment that happened in the room as being sort of like the foundation for the timelessness or lack thereof of a piece of recorded music. It's not to say that you don't add things to it or overdub or what, but it's like when you get into that space where you're putting the ship together in a bottle, it's very difficult to not start listening for all the little ingredients of the ship, because you can manipulate them, and then you do. Yeah. And then when you listen back years later, you still are listening that way. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. I'm theorizing here, but
I don't know if the listener feels it to the same degree we do.
No.
They just hear whatever it is that you say the end result is, they take for granted and they just listen to it and it's done.
Yeah.
But I think that's an immense power to wield in either direction. Like, because of that, even if there are mistakes on it and things that are out of tune and things that are wrong, when they hear it, they just go, oh, this is the record. They don't think like, oh, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
They just go, oh, they must have meant to do that because it's the way it is.
Yeah.
Like, they're not listening with that revisionist editor's brain.
Yeah.
We never listen to music that way. And like, there's tons of old recordings with insane
out-of-tune singing or totally.
Messed up, bad rhythm, like weird shit all over the place. And just not being so hard on yourself, and also just realizing both with recording and with live performances, like, then this is all, if we had this conversation a year ago, I don't think I would be this articulate about this stuff. I think it's sort of coming into focus really now, more than ever. And I just, with live performances and records, it's all about just fully embracing the moment that you're in. And if you do that effectively and you're really there, you're really present, the whole audience does it too. And for like an hour, hour and a half, nobody thinks about anything else. They just live in that moment. And that's what we like about music. That's what we like about shows. That's what we like about records. I think that when we're making records in advance, for someone to have that experience later of really being in the moment, it's also important that we focus on staying in that moment and we capture that moment honestly, and
it's very well put. This actually, it occurs to me that the power of great acting. Whenever I see great acting, it's that it doesn't matter the technique. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just about like being so convicted and so caught up in the moment that time stops.
Yeah.
On screen, if you're watching it in a movie or in an audience, and it like doesn't do that unless you're doing that. You as the actor, you have to do it first.
Yeah.
That's the only prerequisite for anyone else's ability to join you in that eternal now.
I don't, what is the difference? Because in my mind, like, well, how could you, I know there's like, I'm going to say it wrong and this will show my just lack of knowledge about acting, but there's like method and then there's like the other one or something.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong.
Okay, but the idea being that like, well, some people,
Meisner.
They really get into it and they believe it when they're saying it. In my mind, I'm like, well, wouldn't all actors have to, like, is there some sort of cognitive dissonance that certain actors can have where they're just doing the facial expressions? Like, that sounds like being a sociopath to me. Like, to my mind, any good actor would have to believe what's happening with the characters and have to believe that the things they were saying were in that moment true, and at least to some degree, like, fully be in that character, right?
You would think in this, I'm a wee babe in this world, so I would hate to make any sort of pronouncement, but I would say that, and definitely even in my limited experience on camera and stuff, there are technical pieces of things where you learn over time how gestures will read on camera depending on like the lens that's in the camera. So if like a wide shot, if you need to do something that's like big, you got to make it kind of bigger. But if you know like that shot's going to be really close, then the whole universe is here in the tiniest little motion. So there's a little bit of that, and maybe you're like slightly cognizant of that, but there's still this like leap of into the tumbling unknown. I mean, I got into this late in the game, and only after I like lost my voice and scary things happened in music, and I was just like, wow, I'd canceling gigs, and this is like 16 or 15 maybe, and I had always been interested in that world, and I joined an acting class, and the very first time I saw like a scene study, I was so I'd never gone to theater. Small town Idaho, there's no theater. But being in the presence of just even like people acting, they were fine actors, but the suspension of disbelief was so amazing. Like it was moving, and I just wanted to be part of it. And then the very first time I did that, having been like a lifetime musician, where there's a good bit of like it's happening behind closed doors. You're learning, you're practicing, you're getting better, and then you kind of, there's math involved with the rhythm and everything, and you kind of learn how to do it. And you can not hide behind the technique, but you can lean on the technique that you've learned to carry the day. And with acting, no such net exists.
Yeah.
And you just really have the tools that everybody has. It's just you out there. And that crazy moment when you step out and like the director says action, or you're on stage, it is the wildest feeling in the world. It is different for me than playing music, where I can do it. You know, I can kind of hang. I like doing it. It's easy. With acting, there's something else that's happening. That's another step into like the unscripted, chaotic void of being. That I find it used to be like really vitalizing and terrifying, and sometimes I'm real bad. I'm probably often real, but once in a while you're just like, we're flying here.
Yeah.
I don't even know what's like, there's no I.
Yeah.
There's just this relationship happening. It's incredible.
I've done random little acting things, and my wife is a filmmaker, and I told you earlier about her film, and then she made this short film, proof of concept for the feature, and I acted as, I'm one of the characters in this. I'll send it to you.
I'd love to see it.
I was so incredibly nervous to do this, and I was like, just get somebody else. You don't want me to do this. And she was like, you're going to be great. You're going to do it. And it is like, just so exposing and naked. There's all of this fucking equipment everywhere. Like all these cameras are like arms and like crazy microphones, and there's all these people standing around, like 20 more people all standing around. They're all staring at you. Lights are pointed at you, and everybody else knows what they're doing. And I am just like, I'm such an idiot. You know what I mean? Like I'm just like, Erica is the director. She's the one in charge. So I'm just like trying to just be on her good side, and not do a bad job. And I just think all these people are going to walk away from this being like, that fucking musician doesn't, and I think it turned out okay. It's hard for me to watch myself because I just look at it and I go, well, clearly that's fake. Because it's me on screen. I feel like I look uncomfortable just being normal. And that's something I'm trying to get better at. It's like just, looking at myself and being like, well, that's me. That's like a growing up
Me too.
lesson.
No, I think I'm in that place right now. Yeah. I see myself in a mirror, and instead of going like, ugh, be like,
that's it.
There I am. This is me right now.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. When I hear a performance or see a picture from a show, I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's the same thing we were talking about recording earlier, though, is like if you can sharpen that skill, and when you listen back to something and that's the question you ask yourself, like, is it me? Then I think you're really starting to you're onto something. Because if you think like, is it perfect? It's never going to be right. Is it good? I don't know. That's subjective. But like, is it you? That's the one thing that's in your control. So if you're kind of always faithful to that, I feel like the end result is good.
Let me ask you a question of a different nature. And I don't know how to ask this exactly. But the question is something about, what is it do you think that animates your desire to make music and write songs now, as opposed to the wildness of youth and dreams of stardom, and like the Robert Ellis as a late teen or early 20-something or a mid 20-something, and the Robert Ellis of now, different people, different stations in life. You're a family guy, you have 3 kids. Is there any way to speak to that? Or
I mean, I could definitely just contrast
riff,
the two headspaces. I think I spent a lot of my 20s sort of reorienting, just both with my career and just life. In a way, I think we already sort of touched on, but just like all of my aspirations about what I wanted to do with music, I feel like I was focusing on the wrong thing. Like, let's see if I can put a finer point on this. What I wanted to do from the beginning was play music. But I think I had all of this expectation wrapped up in this other plot line, this other story that was about all of the ways I wanted to play music, all the places I wanted to play music, all the things I wanted to do with music. Like, really just cliche, just like the success element of it. Like when I was a kid and I saw Led Zeppelin's
Swan Song. The song remains the same.
yeah,
The Madison Square Garden.
I was obsessed with that. And that was all I wanted to do. I thought one day I'm going to be playing at Madison Square Garden and I'm going to be shredding electric guitar in a fucking flowing unitard. And like
Shirtless.
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know, just like putting out a record. I remember the first one and the second one and the third one. You always have this feeling of like, this is going to be it.
Yeah.
This is going to be the one that changes things. Like, and everyone in the music business encourages you to feel this way. This is like built in to the business, this illusion of some sort of progress or forward momentum, or you have to do this record and then that's going to build on that. And then you're going to be in this place. And you're always sort of looking forward to some future date that, in my opinion, never arrives.
Yeah.
And I just think now the goal is to play music. I see a therapist like once a week over Zoom. And, she was asking the other day how I've been doing. And I was like scoring this podcast, which was really fun. And then I had a couple random gigs, like put those in the pile of like work that I need to do that I'm on deadline for. But every morning I try and make some time. I've been super into fretless acoustic guitar. It's like all I've been playing. A buddy gave me this Rogue dreadnought guitar that his guitar builder friend ripped the frets off of, and it's cool and it sounds cool, and I'm pretty obsessed with it. I think it's a really cool sound, and I'm just writing a bunch of instrumental tunes for the fretless acoustic guitar, not really with any intention of ever even recording them. Maybe I'll make a record, but it's not for anything. Like I'm not playing music for any reason other than playing music. And when I'm doing it, it feels good and I like it. And I just am really intentionally not thinking about what it's for. Like any of this stuff is like, it exists on its own in the moment that you're doing it. It doesn't need all this other shit that we put onto it for it to be special. And in fact, I think that's the thing that ends up making you jaded and ends up making you feel overwhelmed and frustrated, is when you start constantly living in the future.
This preconceived notion of what success looks like, or where this was all going, or hasn't gone yet, or
yeah. And just being there in the moment when it's happening. Like I've already told you, I'm not a religious person. I'm quite the opposite. But like I play church gigs sometimes. I do a myriad of different things with music, and no matter what it is, I enjoy playing the music. Like I'm in it. Like if I'm doing a praise and worship song, playing piano, I am fucking playing the shit out of that song.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
So like, I just don't think there's any time, at least for myself, anymore to bullshit and like to like not enjoy this shit. It needs to be fun.
Yeah, well, I feel like you're pretty young yet, man. So I think that the years look promising.
I hope,
for more of that exploration.
You've got 10 years on me, I think.
I do.
Let me know if you feel this way, but I feel like now, for the first time ever, I'm like, okay, this is the program. That the rest, I know there's going to be changes. I know there's going to be gradations, but like the overall thing, like where my head is at, what I want out of life, I kind of feel like I've hit this place where I'm like, okay, this is it for the rest of my life. It's going to be more or less this, or at least this is the ideal.
I'm a slower learner than you, so it hit me a little bit later, but I think maybe everybody grapples with this at some point, an artist or otherwise. And for me, I realized one day that success meant having my hours, the waking hours of my day, most closely resemble what I would like them to be.
Yeah.
And that I'm really happy to say that is where I'm living right now, and it's just a wonderful thing. Like every day is different. Every day I'm fortunate to live in this world of creative possibility, talking to really interesting people. I'm doing my own thing in music. I play music every day. I'm writing. I'm doing all the stuff that I'm always wanted to do. And it's so nice once you divest that expectation of the actual work, that your work can finally blossom, and you could not only that, you can just be happy.
Yes.
You can be happy and grateful.
That is the point. That is the whole point. I don't know if I really said it the right way, but that's it. Just changing your idea of what it is to be successful, and just sort of like, yeah, this is it. This is what we're doing, and I like it. And not feeling like, well, I'll be happy if, and I'll be satisfied when, and there are all sorts of limiting factors, like I'm definitely not going to discount any number of socioeconomic things, or, just cause and effect. Like, it is difficult for some people because of their circumstances to just drop everything and play guitar. But on the flip side of it, it really is that easy in your own mind, even if it's just for 2 minutes. If you fully do something like that, I think I find it so rewarding.
One of the main reasons for this podcast is because I have a strong belief in the same thing. Everybody is a creative person. Everybody wants to be, and creativity isn't a thing you are or aren't. It is the act of taking a chance and making something. And that can be as little as writing a haiku on a note card that you never show anybody and throw away. But just like that is still like, as wide a gap as moving from the tonic to the dominant. That's trying to do a callback. It didn't quite work. But you know what I mean? Like, stepping into the void is the thing. Yeah. Stepping there. And I want to, like, people, I hope that listening to this podcast feel like they too, there's something everybody's like, that's rattling around inside every heart that wants to like try and explore, and we're all on our own journey, but we all have an opportunity that's as simple as just like picking up the guitar that you walk past a million times. Yeah. And that's it. If you only did it one time for the rest of your life, but you did it this time, that's everything. You just get to do it again.
And you don't even need, one thing that I'm realizing really lately is you don't even need anything external to do it. You can do it in your own mind. It's a shift in just the way you look at the world and you think about things. Like, when you're laying down to go to sleep, you have a few options. You can look at your phone, which is like a just distraction machine. And sometimes I do that. I enjoy doing the crossword. I do that every day. That's fun.
I do the spelling bee on the New York Times.
Yeah, it's great.
Love it.
Or you can close your eyes, and what I did for most of my life is just let my thoughts just take me on a ride that I didn't sign up
you were not in charge of.
That I was not in charge of, and just let my mind just have its way with me and just go in all these directions. Or you can just take a moment and focus on where you actually are and notice. I mean, this is all the meditation shit, which I know is lame, and I don't want to like be that person that's always talking about it, but it's huge. It's just like, just be exactly where you are. Like, throughout the day, I'm trying to just wake up from the dream of being hijacked by whatever thing, whatever train I've jumped on. I'm just trying to wake up and be like, I'm here right now. These are the sounds in the room. This is the way my breath feels. And playing music is the same thing. It's just like doing the thing you're doing, not doing a million other things and planning and anticipating, and just doing that thing right then. That's it. That's like all I want to do. And it's very, very hard to consistently do that. Everything is working against us to not do that.
Yeah. Well, on that encouraging note, I think that we should maybe call it here. This has been a really wonderful conversation, man. As far as I'm concerned, and that's all I care about.
Well, likewise. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry for the silence after you said that.
You were just checking yourself in the cam. That's cool.
I was seeing there's a monitor.
No, I wish you the best, man. Have a great run of shows, and I think I might see you this weekend, actually, in Old Fort Worth at the bar. I'm going to be playing there.
Please, Saturday.
So I might swing by.
Yes.
Shipping in.
Yes, it's called Distribution Bar right now, but it was called Shipping and. We're actually having a show Saturday night.
Well, I'll swing by.
You should come.
I will.
Yes.
Are you playing?
Love that. Maybe.
Well.
Yeah, you might be too.
I love. Ooh. It's just lost in mystery.
There's a music festival happening, and I have 3 bands that are going to play. Friends of mine. They're all awesome, but I might do something because it's my bar. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. I love it. The future's wide open. Thanks so much, man. Wish you the best.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring songs of the Morse Code Podcast. Okay, thank you very much.